Hello, Nirvana. It's not the first time that I see you, but we have not met each other in physical form, have we? Although
Not
we
yet.
travel all the world for RegTech events, but unfortunately, we never met.
We never met in person, but we have been meeting virtually and have been connected. So that's been brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And well, you're not particularly close to me either, right? I live in Belgium and you're all the way in close to Silicon Valley, right?
Absolutely. I'm based out here over the pond, as they say back in the UK. So I moved out here about 4 years ago now. And since COVID struck, I've been pretty much stuck here. So
Like so many people, right?
exactly, exactly.
Nirv, it's so nice to have you as an author in the book, and it has
Thank
been
you.
even nicer to the fact that you came with a very provocative way of thinking, at least in my opinion. While you turned it all upside down. You really thought about tech, but you also thought about reg, because you were actually insinuating that it should be the tech that should be regulated. Can you enlighten us a little bit on what was your reasoning? How do you come to that? And yeah, I'm just curious.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me a part of this initiative. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure. So thank you for that. And
Welcome.
well, the chapter, yeah, absolutely. I've been talking about this for a while now, a few years, and I've been saying that the possibility or technology getting regulated is very imminent and very close. And I'm not a psychic by any means, but there has been certain patterns and shifts that I've seen. If we look back at the Cambridge Analytica Facebook debacle, we'll
Mhm.
see what happened there and what the impact was. So it's kind of been on the periphery, on the horizon and happening. And it's actually quite fortuitous since I wrote that article for the book. A lot of things have happened in that space. Again, more disasters with the aforementioned Facebook organization, which is called Meta now, as if a name change is going to take away regulatory implications.
It's
But
a
we
trick, right? It's a trick.
right. It works. But we saw the whistleblower and the Facebook papers, as they've come to be known now, come out, and also the company going down also for a period for half a day, which meant, what did their operational resilience look like? And regulators are really starting to investigate and look at that. And prior to that, we had, especially here in the US, the regulators really looking at the different big techs and
Mhm.
what are they doing? How are they regulating and trying to understand it? Another incident since writing the article, which kind of came to light for me, because in the article I highlight, we need smart regulation, not stupid regulation. And it was very curious out here in the States. We had the Congress looking at Instagram and speaking to a lady from Facebook and saying, a congressman was saying, do you promise to stop Finsta? And when you watch that dialogue, it's so clear that this poor chap has no idea what a fake Instagram account is, what Instagram is. And these are the people that are making regulations. So this is where I think my article and the way I talk about it, it's so important that we have regulation.
Mhm.
Absolutely, but the right type of regulation, and those in power to understand the implications of what does that technology mean, what is happening, to be informed. Now, this poor chap, it's not through no fault of his own, he doesn't understand it. Sometimes I get confused with all the advancements, when I'm using my social media platforms. It's changing second by second and so rapidly, especially in the last couple of years with COVID. And we've been forced into this
Mhm.
digital transformation that was already taking momentum, but more so now in light of what happened recently. So it's so important. And that really highlighted it. So It was a very interesting thing for me to write, and I've been very much openly advocating in my career, in the work that I do in industry, to really work and collaborate with regulators, with industry key stakeholders. And what does that mean? You know, what does the technology actually mean? I used to take regulators to our offices at another role that I was in, to make them understand the technology, get their heads around it, so it informed their policy making when they were doing that. So I hope that kind of answers part of your question.
It does actually. I appreciate the passion that you bring by pulling all those different elements together, because it almost sounded when you said in the beginning about the big companies, but in banking we would call that too big to fail. And that would bring them in a different light, and it put some additional, maybe an extra pair of eyes from a regulatory point of view. I think it makes sense that also the big tech companies are part of that, because, and maybe that's then a question to you, because big tech is there, and it is playing a more important role in banking. Is that also the way you see it? The way you see it also from the States?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you story. I think it was about 7-8 years ago now, if memory serves me correctly. I was on a panel, industry stakeholders there, very prominent people on the panel, people from the regulators, etc. And we were talking about financial services and technology and where the future of financial services. And I turned around and I said, we have to be careful. We have new entrants into this space, and they are the big techs. People like Amazon, Google, those guys, they're moving into this space. And somebody on the panel, I won't name names, laughed at me and said, you know, they're already good at what they do. If I was a Google or Amazon, why on earth would I want to move into financial services? The next day, one of those big tech companies released a financial service product. So I've been saying this for years. And as we've progressed, we are now seeing the incumbent brick and mortar banks, they're on the recline. And really, these big techs are stepping into this space, you know, the likes of Uber Wallet, Amazon, Apple, everybody is vying to be the operating system of our lives. And that includes our financial services and our finances and our planning, and everybody has a product. So absolutely, they play a very important and prominent role. So to answer your question, it was always something that, again, I saw happening and tried to shout and scream about it at the time, but was laughed at. And then now everyone's like, oh, right,
but
okay, maybe.
That's always the case with famous people, right?
Don't know about that.
I mean, I was not the word famous that I was looking, but the visionary people, that was probably the better wording.
Although visionaries are sometimes touted as lunatics. So, you know, it goes with it.
It's a thin line, isn't it?
Absolutely.
From time to time. No, but you're right. And what I particularly find clever about the big tech is or the big players is that they often provide services. They surf on the trust with people, but they're not regulated. They're not a bank. They kind of hover around it. And to that extent, it could be also an argument to say that, when it looks like and it smells like, it's probably a duck, right? Or a flower, or whatever they say.
Exactly.
So now that does make sense. So if you then take this back to more general RegTech, I think for you, what you just said, then, regulation is extremely important, but regulator, get to know your tech. What would be your advice to them? How would you go about to learn more tech, rather than just calling you, of course, but apart from that?
Look, I mean, we've seen this. A lot of people are talking about us being in the fourth industrial revolution. Obviously, prior to COVID happening, this talk was already starting. We've bounded leaps and bounds and, you know, pivoted forward with this tech revolution that's been taking place, even more so now, with all the transformation and new technologies and what have you. So in order to survive, I've seen a lot of people trying to transform themselves and upscale themselves and become, you know, more involved in research and research projects and innovation projects, R&D projects within their organizations. But really, in terms of the regulators and what they're doing, collaboration is key. We're seeing this in the UK. I saw this a lot. I worked a lot with the UK regulators, and they really were front runners in trying to collaborate with industry stakeholders, creating
totally
sandboxes, tech sprints, etc. And it's so important. And they also faced a challenge internally because they had the incumbent side of the regulators where, you know, for them, this technology shift was completely new, and they had to understand, they were challenged as to how it would impact them. So internally, they've faced a battle as well as externally, and that's not just the FCA, but we're seeing regulators across the globe, the Australian ASIC regulatory authority, etc., who are really adopting RegTech and trying to both enable themselves and their members in adopting these type of technologies. So to answer your question in a rather roundabout way, it's key for them to understand what these technologies mean, really work with and come to the table with the view of, okay, what does this mean? How does it impact the business? Understand the businesses that they're regulating. These technology shifts are happening so rapidly, so it's so important that the individuals upskill themselves and get their knowledge on board with a view to understanding what the impact is, rather than just being there to say yes or no, or this is what the regulation says and that's all we're going to do. Because I've also seen that side of it too, where there's a kind of blinkered view as to what's happening. So it's collaboration is absolutely essential across the board.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I mean, there has been a time, 2008 with the crisis, it was also the right thing for both the regulator to step in my opinion, and to work hard towards a better future, if I can put it in a blunt way. But it was also a first priority, a high priority from compliance people within the banks to cope with those regulations. And I have a lot of appreciation for them because they really were inside and trying to solve a real problem. But what I noticed is that they sometimes had no time to put their head outside and look outside of the box and look what was out in the market. So it feels sometimes also, and again, it's not a complaint. It's not finger pointing anyone. I think it was just the way it was. But you feel that they're runner-ups in knowing what's out in the market, and indeed, it's going fast. It's going even faster every day. But if you have to get something in, I mean, are you runner-up in terms of insight? It's not that easy, I can imagine as well.
Absolutely. So to your point, I've been in the industry for a very long time, both in financial services, and then I kind of straddled both worlds in terms of the tech side too. But I started off my career in compliance, audit, regulation. So I've got a risk compliance operations background. And prior to the financial services collapse, it was very much, if you were in compliance, and I had many roles where I was, the deputy head of compliance, or I was the head of compliance, you pretty much did everything if it was a smaller company. And you had oversight of pretty much everything. After the financial services collapse, there was a lack of trust, both from firms towards the regulators and regulators towards the firms, because the regulators had heat on them. They needed to make things look better. And the firms were scared, because if you called up, and everything became siloed also. And if you called up the regulator for a self-identified issue, I remember this very well, you would find yourself sometimes facing a dawn raid, which that trust just kind of evaporated. And I've seen that trust trying to be built back, both from both parties, both industry and the regulatory perspective, but it took time. And in the meanwhile, what happened was that everything became in silos. So whereas before I would have oversaw, financial promotions, transaction reporting, KYC, all of those functions, these became very niche, and people were very siloed in their own little boxes. Nobody would want to venture out slightly outside. So we had had a lot of duplication also happening and occurring. And in terms of compliance individuals, prior to the financial services collapse, I remember we were quite proactive. And, it was compliance that was saying, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then suddenly they had to become reactive because there was a tsunami of regulations coming out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the regulators had to, come up with the regulations and write these. And it was, oftentimes when these things happen, I mentioned, we saw the financial services collapse. So what happened after that was it happened. It was a collapse and it happened and nobody preempted it. It happened in the worst way possible. And the result of that was regulators trying to fight the wars of yesterday, standing there like a fireman with the hose running, but the house is already burnt to a crisp. And the result of that is, putting in regulations that are onerous, draconian, and often overreach what they really should be doing, and stifling that kind of innovation. And compliance teams are scrambling just to keep up and keep their heads above water. And we saw a high rise of compliance costs because, the businesses were just mainly focused, instead of generating revenue, and that were more focused on being compliant and keeping up with the regulatory implications. So that's what we saw.
So now I'm going to try to be a visionary too. I think that what is going to happen in the next couple of years, and I'm curious to know your feedback on it. I totally see what you're coming from, but you also notice that now for the last couple of years, there is more trust, especially from the first lines, the business. They're more comfortable because they went through a phase of being compliant, at least in their opinion. And what I've been seeing now is that now it is business as usual, and compliance became something very labor intensive. So now they are faced with these efficiency programs like a lean program or a zero budgeting process, which will be a completely new phase. And I think a catalyst also for everything that goes with RegTech, because they will be forced or gently forced to go to technology. How do you look at that?
Well, Cohen, to be honest with you, I think this has already been happening, and it really frustrates me that we sometimes have this conversation where I'm speaking to people and they're like, what's the market opportunity for RegTech? It's happening. It has to be there, not just in financial services, across the board. Just look at the past 2 years. There have been so many shifts from remote working. Overnight, everyone's operations had to be shifted outside of the organizational building, brick and mortar buildings, into people's homes. So look at that. How did we regulate that? And the regulators and industry had to really step up their game and really invest more and more in RegTech type solutions to be able to navigate that. So it's already happening. It's happening, and more so happening. And I agree with you with, lean. What did you call it? Lean.
Zero budgeting. These are
zero
just techniques,
budgeting,
right?
Techniques. I think it's essential. I think RegTech is going to be ingrained within organizations' operational resiliency plans, product development at the design stage. They need to have that compliance by design focus when they're developing their products to really, stop all the peripheral things that are happening in terms of extra costs, and focusing their energies elsewhere and really concentrating on getting what they need to do right from the get-go and focusing on that. I think RegTech is here to stay, not just in financial services,
I agree.
Any sector that is hit by technology. There was a misconception, in my view, that RegTech was a subset of fintech. I completely disagree with that.
Me too.
Absolutely. Because, it's not. It hits any sector that there is regulation. And RegTech is more than just a bunch of solutions to me. It's, as one of the pioneers for this, it's more like a philosophy, a principle, really, that compliance by design, ethical, compliant technology that we need to apply across the board and become more efficient. And actually, it helps with innovation. right? I think
it's an
oftentimes
enabler,
when you're
right?
boxed in, it's an enabler. Absolutely.
I agree.
And it enables you to also, monetize more as well. And it's more a philosophy rather than just a set of solutions.
Oh, I
So I
totally
think
agree.
it's
It
definitely
gives
here to stay.
it gives me goosebumps when you say it like this, because that's exactly the way I feel too. That was also the reason why we started to write the first book. And we found it was time to write a second one, because we felt maturity of RegTech is even increasing. And as you say, it's definitely here to stay. That's something we already quoted before, but yeah, we feel now it's really on that verge of really passing through to the industry and far beyond. I totally agree.
Absolutely. You were saying it, excuse me, in healthcare, telco, automotive industry, pretty much everywhere, media and entertainment, it's a productivity superpower tool, if you're going to adopt it as a tool. As a principle, it's a best practice principle for your business. So I think it's here to stay, and leaders and leadership, especially in this day and age, it's not business as usual anymore. Business as usual doesn't exist. It's business as unusual.
Indeed. But talking about business as usual, Nif, why should people contact you? Because
why should they?
Yeah, I think it's always like an important question to ask in these interviews, because I want people to know why they could contact you, get in touch with you, reach out with you, collaborate. I think it's always nice if people make that kind of definition.
Thank you. So I've had 20 plus years experience within financial services and regulation, as I said, with a risk compliance hat on. I've also uniquely had the opportunity and good fortune to be able to straddle the tech side and have been pioneering for RegTech since about 2012, I believe, when we first started kind of finding the idea within financial services. And I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot in the many years that I've been in the industry. I have a good plastic surgeon. I might not look my age. But I've seen a lot, both from a regulatory perspective. I've advised on regulations, I've advised regulators on regulations across the board, whether it's been on technical standards of transaction reporting, whether it's been on data privacy. And my remit has always been global. So I've traveled the world talking to global regulators, global industry stakeholders and businesses, and really understanding the pain points that businesses have, as well as the regulatory perspective. So if people are looking for advice and harness my experience and leverage those insights, I think that's why they would call me.
Mm-hmm. Very clear. Thank you very much for sharing that. We're almost at the end of the interview, and I know there's much more we can tell about, or we can speak and talk for hours about RegTech, because it's clearly both our passion and also the passion of many of the other authors in the book.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, not only for today's contribution, but also the contribution in the book itself. And let's hope that we can really get the movement going. So thank you for that. And also thank you to the listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
The pleasure is all yours. I've been saying, I've been taking my bike from the work, and I've been really fast. So I'm a bit still distracted, but the pleasure is all ours. That's probably better.
It's fine. The pleasure is mine too.
So thank you very much also to the audience that have been listening into this interview. As you see, RegTech people can also make good fun. So please don't hesitate to check out the other interviews. Follow us, like us, share us, get in contact with us, and spread the message about RegTech.